were in law school. We both grew up in the same area. Katie, where I call home, is where she lived, where she grew up in the area, and I grew up just 24 miles north of there. So our families knew each other. We both went to A&M, but we didn't meet through our families or through A&M. We actually met when we were in law school. So I was a year ahead of her in school, and then we met her first semester. And so, in other words, we ended up going out that Christmas, and we've been together ever since.
Who is your childhood hero?
Wow. I'd say it'd probably be a combination of people that, in my family, I grew up a sixth-generation Texan, so I grew up on a family farming operation, and it enabled me to grow up around my dad, my grandfather, my grandparents were around, my grandfather, and my grandmother from my mom's side. My grandfather's a Baptist preacher, and so the point being is, I would say really more or less a lot of influence of my grandparents, and then I had a lot of great aunts and uncles. And I'd say that influence was as much or more than anything else on me. People tend to look up parents are one thing, grandparents are kind of another status.
Who is your political hero?
I'm not the type that just says one person, because the way I see it, we're all human, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. And so I'm the type that I try to look at what the higher qualities in a lot of different people are, and take a combination of that. I mean, a lot of times I'll say for example, some I think really influential people that have been involved in politics, all over across the ocean. I say people like Margaret Thatcher and Winston Churchill, people such as Abraham Lincoln is interesting because he lost how many elections before he ever became president. I mean, it's phenomenal. It really is. And then I think part of what it is who is a person that is just kind of put at a certain time in history, and what do they do with that time in history? That it's how they shape what's around. In other words, and how it shapes them, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. What made you pursue a career in politics?
Maybe a lack of good children. Honestly, growing up, I wanted to be involved with my family, business-wise. My grandfather, who was a Baptist preacher, was a big influence on me. I thought about actually trying to be a minister. However, I also had a very big interest in politics, because people that represent us in government, whether it is on the federal, the state, local level, cities, counties, you name whatever level, they have influence in our lives. And I always wonder, who are these people? What are their values? What do they represent? And so it's something that I've always had an interest in. And so therefore, back in 2002, when my home county of all my life, Waller County, was put in a new state representative district. There's 150 state reps in the Texas House of Representatives in Austin. And so therefore, that was a new state rep seat, and it happened to be at a crossroads when I had some time available, so I ran for that seat. And then it's kind of there I've been ever since. And one of the things I really enjoy working on a lot of different issues. I like working with people. I like to hear about their experiences and what shaped them. And so therefore, it's kind of like being a jack of all trades. You get to work on a lot of different very interesting things and working towards solutions. Not that I think government is always the one that can solve solutions, but sometimes you're the conduit to help bring people together.
What would you say is your greatest accomplishment during your tenure as a Texas representative or senator?
Wow. I've been fortunate to work on a lot of different issues, whether it's water legislation, as in Texas, we're growing about 1,200 people a day, which is a phenomenal number of people that move to Texas every single day. So therefore, we've grown in 6+ million people in the last 13 years. So therefore, whether it's water legislation, transportation, education issues, what I would deem as Second Amendment rights, I've worked on streamlining state agencies. I would say that's probably one of the biggest accomplishments, is taking a state agency, looking at it, and knowing that you can get greater efficiency and effectiveness out of that state agency. And so therefore taking agencies to say, you know what, you're really not doing the job that you need to do, you're not serving the taxpayers in the best manner. So how do we reorganize you to make you more efficient, or actually eliminating some or putting them somewhere else? And so in that time in the legislature, I'd say that's one of the greatest accomplishments, because I found ways to find a way for them to work better in the 21st century and save millions of dollars and work better for the taxpayer. So I'd say that's probably the greatest accomplishment, if you had to pick one.
How were you able to cut $1 billion in taxes during the 83rd legislative session?
Good question. We actually, one of the main things that we had focused on is, one, giving every business that pays into what's called the margins tax, the franchise tax, to give everybody a 5% tax cut. And so you can say, well, 5% is not a significant amount of money, but actually 5% of your money is your money. It adds up and you can do something with it. So one, we decided that it was extremely important, because the state economy is doing very well. It's important to give people some of their money back. So we did an across-the-board tax cut, and we went in and looked at certain businesses that were really being treated unfairly and tried to readjust the tax system to treat them more in a fair manner.
What prompted you to seek the comptroller position?
This is a very good question. The comptroller, do you know what the comptroller does?
Does the taxes for Texas?
Very good, very good. You're one of maybe 5 people that know that in the room. No, there's a bunch of people here that know it, but the average citizen, you essentially are the state treasurer. You're the individual who collects the taxes and deals with the taxpayers. And throughout my time in business, I have dealt with financial numbers all over. So that's one experience that I have. Serving in the legislature, I've said, number one, doesn't qualify me in and of itself, but I understand how to work with people. I understand what it takes to work with a large organization. And the comptroller's office is really more than the accountant and the tax collector. You also are the person who can drive policy, as in, how do you find more efficient ways in government? And those are things that I've accomplished through my career. And so therefore, I see this as an opportunity to really make sure that government works better for who? The taxpayers.
How do you plan to replace property tax, and how will this be beneficial?
Well, I've said over and over that for 12 plus years that I think property taxes are a tax that is very cumbersome. It's very hard to administer. I've always said that I believe that more of a consumption tax is easier to administer. It's much more fair. However, as the controller, that's not something that I essentially have domain or ability. That is the legislature. What it amounts to is you have the state House of Representatives and the Texas Senate. And the way the Constitution is the Texas House of Representatives is the one that if you're going to change taxes, any shape, form, or fashion, they have to start it. And when they start it, then it goes to the state Senate. So me as a state senator right now, I don't have the ability. I can work on it when it gets to me, such as when we do the tax cuts. But my point being is the controller, I can talk about the economic benefits, obviously, but it's not as though I have the ability in and of itself.
If you are able to persuade the House to look into it, how will this be funded?
Well, actually, it would. The short of it is that's something that, again, the House of Representatives, every legislative session, there's a lot of different pieces of legislation filed to deal with the tax cut. And so, therefore, it's something that's been a discussion ever since I've been there. It'll continue to be a discussion. Well, essentially, if a tax is collected, whether it's a property, a sales tax, or a different type of tax, it comes from the local area. Say, for example, if you've gone to a store lately and paid a sales tax, you paid a sales tax. That's derived locally, that is spent locally. And so, like with the local cities are funded 6 1/4% of any purchase, almost not all purchases, but certain ones. That's where you derive a sales tax from. And so therefore that goes to the local tax entity, and it's no different. It's the same mechanism. It's very complicated because there's a lot of entities that derive a portion of their tax dollars from property tax. So obviously it's something that is not easy to completely replace, and I've said that over and over again, but I've always said is that there is a fairer way, in my opinion, over and over, that is a sales tax overall.
My final question is, what advice would you give to a college student who's looking to pursue a career in politics?
I would say number one, I think it's very important to understand the governmental process. That it's to be able to get involved, as in to come up to whether Republican Party events, understand how government can impact your lives locally, state, and also federally. Understand how you can be engaged. So in other words, you can volunteer and help on a campaign. You can help locally with a party. As you're in high school, some high schools have party chapters. Then in college, you can be involved. And I think it's really important to just essentially learn a little bit about the process. And then whether you want to work on campaigns, run for political office yourself, there's a wide variety of opportunities, but it's just showing up and saying, hey, here I am, I want to help, I want to figure out a way. And that's how you first get involved. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you're done now.